Hey everyone, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined here by Covey and a couple guests this time around. We can't wait to get into them, but before we do that, love and appreciation to those who continue to follow and show the same back.
What's going on, guys? Like MD said, we've got two guests here today, which is unique. Very excited to introduce both Gaby and Meadow. They are co-hosts of their own mental health podcast called Thoughtsmayvary. And just really excited to have this conversation. I would say, we had an introductory call, and there were just a lot of chemistries between us all, and a lot of synergies. And I will just say, I was very impressed in listening to your guys' podcast, just the chemistry you all have with each other. We've been doing this for a little while, but it just seemed, the conversation seems to just flow so naturally, especially when it's just you two. We've done a couple conversations where it was just us, and that's a lot of work, so it's just very admirable. So without further ado, and I'm sure you all will see that in this conversation today, so without further ado, Gaby, Meadow, why don't you guys just provide an introduction of who you guys are and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. That was such a nice introduction. We loved that introductory call. I know we were all really excited to sit down for this, so thank you for having us, and thanks for the nice spiel on Thoughtsmayvary. We appreciate it. I'm Gaby. I started my career in pretty traditional editorial media. I was working at Condé Nast at Architectural Digest. I was the assistant to the editor-in-chief, and I was writing, being an assistant, doing all the things that come in magazine land. Honestly thought that was going to be the end-all be-all for me. I really went into my career being I'm going to be an editor-in-chief. I'll stay at Condé Nast forever. That's the plan. That's the goal. Hoping that, by forever, I mean maybe a decade and a half, and then leave, be an entrepreneur, do that. That was sort of the big picture for me. And then once I actually got there, I felt it was an incredible opportunity, and I learned so much, but it was one of those moments where I felt like I kind of saw Oz, and I was like, maybe this isn't where I want to be for an extended period of time. Maybe this isn't the career trajectory that is meant for me anymore. And I really just sucked all I could out of that opportunity and really put my heart and soul into it. And then when it was time to go, I took the leap of faith and decided to go off on my own. But what was a big catalyst about going freelance was I was really digging into the type of storytelling I wanted to do with my writing primarily, and also with discovering and navigating new ways to storytell, be it on camera, on a podcast, which is not something that I thought would happen that quickly, TV, sort of that world of storytelling. And during that exploration time, I was reached out to by a friend who was one of the co-founders of Mad Happy, which is a mental health focused clothing company. And at the time, they had a blog called The Local Optimist. And he asked me if I would write a piece for their blog about my mental health. And at this point, I was still working at AD. You have to kind of run everything by the team. And I had never spoken about my mental health publicly. And it was such an important part of my life, particularly because only a year and a half, 2 years prior, I had attended something called the Hoffman process, which I talk about all the time on the podcast, but it's basically I call it really intense therapy camp. It's a week-long mental health retreat. And it was a huge pivotal moment for my life. And I would talk about it in my personal life, but never really spoke about it openly. And my friend asked me to write about it for the blog. And so I was like, okay, great. Let me take a call with whoever leads your blog. And I get on the phone, and it was Meadow. And we immediately fell in love, and we're like, okay, we're going to be best friends. This is obvious. We talked on the phone for 3 hours, and then those conversations just kept happening. And one day we were like, I think we need to record this. I think we need to start a podcast together. Let's do that. And so that's where the idea of Thoughtsmayvary was born. So to wrap up, and then I'll let Meadow explain what she does. I am still a writer, but I'm freelance now. And I also work as a consultant and host Thoughtsmayvary with Meadow. And she can tell you all about her stuff, and we can talk about the pod more. But it's really our little love child. So hearing anybody say anything nice about TMV just warms my heart. So thank you for all those nice things you said.
Of course.
No,
and if anyone can't see, Meadow is wearing arguably the coolest pair of glasses I've ever seen, so check out the video.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Thank you
Meadow, why don't
so
you go ahead
much.
and introduce yourself?
Also, these are new, just like our Love Child podcast. So that's extremely validating to my new look. So thank you so much. It's kind of funny because I have like the flip side of Gabby's coin. I also come from a more traditional background, but it's traditional mental health work. So I was in kind of the nonprofit social work sector for almost 10 years. And similar to Gabby, felt like my tagline was I wanted to move mountains, and I felt like I was moving molehills. Like I realized that like the nonprofit structure didn't really offer me to make the types of changes that I wanted to. And so I was kind of like having the existential crisis. What am I going to do? Where should I go? And I fell into this role at Mad Happy, where Gabby and I had our glorious meet cute and instantly became best friends. And through kind of getting that opportunity, also went freelance. So now I am a consultant for brands and artists that advocate for mental health. So I make sure that their content is trauma informed, backed in research, creative, kind of bridges the gap between the psychology world and their community.
And she's so good at it too.
Thank
Funny
you.
Brands listening.
So no, it's pretty cool because in you guys telling your story, it really resonates. It's similar to ours and why we started. You know, when you're talking about, I feel like we just need to like put this out. Like we're having these conversations that are very, you know, beyond surface level. That's exactly how this transpired. You know, the Men in the Arena sign behind us. So that's very cool to see. I guess to start, Gabby, what drove you ultimately to go to the the Hoffman Institute or the Hoffman Project? I forgot what you said.
Yeah.
But, why don't you first of all maybe just talk a little bit about that? But what kind of drove you to go to something like that, where it's obviously from what I understand, it's very intense, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up hearing about the Hoffman process. Both of my parents had gone. I mean, my dad went when my parents separated, which I think I was like 6 or 7, and I didn't know where he was going. I just knew that he left for a week, and when he came back, he was very happy, and I was like, oh, okay. And he was much like more easygoing, so I knew like something happened to Dad, but like wasn't quite sure what. And then when I was 17, my mom ended up going, and my best friend had gone, or her mom, who's like my godmother, had gone. So I had heard about the process, but you know, sorry, Mom, love you, but like every time it was brought up, it was very much in a moment of me going through some sort of like teenage crisis, which is natural for us all to move through, and it being used as kind of this like punishment of like, you need to go to Hoffman because you need to work on your problems and you're like crazy and you're doing all these, you know, it was used as that. So I always saw it as like the typical stereotypical way that we view, or used to view pre-pandemic particularly, taking care of our mental health. I was like, I'm not crazy. Am I going to be in a hospital? Like, what's going on? This is a punishment. Like, they're just sending me away. I had a really negative connotation around any of that sort of type of work. And when I was in college, I really started digging much more into understanding anxiety, because it was something that like was really, really coming up for me. And I always like joke with Meadow that I was such like a Dear Diary kid, where I would write everything. That was my way of coping, and still really is. But that's kind of like as far as I went. And then in college, I really started experiencing very physical symptoms of anxiety, which hadn't really happened before, or I guess to that extent where they would like last. And when I graduated, I was honestly just like in a shitstorm with some of my friends. Like, there's just no other way to say it. I was just like going through a moment with my friends, as like a lot of 22-year-olds do. And I was about to move to New York City to start my job hunt for my full-time job. And I was feeling really high strung, and I didn't know what else to do. And I'll never forget, I was sitting at the table at my graduation dinner, and I was sobbing. And I looked at my mom and I was like, have you bought me a graduation gift yet? And she was like, no. And I was like, great, can I go to Hoffman? And she was like, say less, sweetie. Like, go tomorrow.
I thought you'd never ask.
Yeah, like,
literally.
thought you'd never ask. And because her and I had that convo. We had the conversation of like, you need to stop telling me to go, because I will never go if this is the like air around the conversation. And that is what led me to go. I honestly was just like spiraling and like was fighting with all my friends.
And that
like,
just goes to
needed
the
do
point of like, for me, like therapy was something similar, where I went, you know, started going a little over a year ago, and it was so transformative for me. And on the other side of it, you know, when I'd seen it kind of work its magic, at least for me, I was then, when I saw people struggling, I would be like, go to therapy. It was so transformative. Like, you got to do it. And people didn't want to do it. And I was so confused. And I had to think to myself, like, if someone would have told me to go to therapy 3 years ago, I would have had a very similar reaction. So I think I see a lot of similarities in what your mom was doing, is she was trying to get you to do something that you ultimately weren't ready for. Yeah. And it didn't take until you were ready to actually make that transition. And I think that's something that I've had to learn, particularly with therapy, is like it's great for me, but I was also ready to change.
Totally.
And if others, you can only change yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You can act as a catalyst, like doing stuff like this. You can act, to help people and talk and share your story and be vulnerable and be open. But people have to want to change.
Yeah. And I really downplayed, by the way, like what I like make jokes of it now, and I'm like, oh, I was just fighting with my friends. But like at the time I didn't have the verbiage. All I knew was like, I had never felt more misunderstood in my entire life. And I kind of grew up always feeling very misunderstood by the people that like I loved the most. And it was this sort of moment that clicked really intensely in my face, and there was no escaping it, where I was like, why do I feel so misunderstood? Oh, it's because I'm making decisions and choices that are like super not in alignment with who I actually am. Why am I doing this? Like, why am I acting this way? Why am I moving this way? Why am I like trying to appease people that like don't want the best for me? So it really came, like there was so much under the surface, but it like what really sparked it in like the moment was like a big fight with my friends.
Mm-hmm. Question for particularly Meadow. A lot of what we talk about as men in the arena is the stigma that's associated with mental health in men, and a lot of us, men are generalizing, of course, not in tune with our emotions. We don't understand them. We're not as self-aware. We're taught to suppress or repress, be stoic, don't cry, don't show weakness, etc., or weakness in air quotes. Mm-hmm. Hearing Gaby talk about her, life as a teenager, moving into college age, the drama that came with it, and her questioning of why am I feeling these ways, and anxiety. Help us, and help our listeners, understand. Like, I just described what it's like to be in the men's locker room, where it's like, hey, you can't cry, etc. What are the stigmas associated, and what have you seen, in your practice with women that show up, and are there stigmas associated with it? What are the phrases that girls are hearing that's detracting them from going and seeking that type of help? And yeah, just take us in the life of what it's like to be, the dramatic teenager, if you will.
Yeah. What a cool question to ask, like particularly coming from men. A lot of men don't even care to ask about the other side, so that's really beautiful. And also, it's just such a testament to how cool it is that the two of you are doing this, because your voices are so needed in this space. Kind of like both of you touched on already, like pre-pandemic, you could not get people to talk about mental health. Like, I've been working in this field and like begging to speak about mental health since 2012 to 2013. And it really took the pandemic for people to kind of open up on a cultural zeitgeist level, or like unanimous level, to really acknowledge it as a real thing. I think what's interesting is that, like you said, like men are not given any tools to cope with their emotions, where women are told you're too emotional. So it's almost like the other side. Like, we're so defined by our emotions, and so kind of given so much opposing narratives of how we should behave, how we should act, if we should take up space, no, take up little space, physically, emotionally, spiritually, like how it reflects in our bodies, how it reflects in how we communicate, how you attract other people. Like, it's so pressurized for women in a different way, where it's completely ignored for men. And both have really interesting problems, and both have unique ways in which they show up. But I think for women, I guess it depends. It depends on the culture. It depends on where you're at. It depends on what age you are. I will say, I think nowadays we are significantly given more tools to even like acknowledge the breadth of experience, which is really beautiful. But I would say, growing up in my teenage angst, it was a lot of like, if you aren't fully in an inpatient and you aren't fully crazy, like that narrative that Gaby thought she was going to go into with Hoffman, like, figure your shit out. Like, you're too emotional, cope with it, deal with it. And you're not really told how that's supposed to look. You're just told messages of you're not enough in all these different areas.
Question
Literally.
there.
Yeah.
In your opinion, and maybe this is a topic for conversation, is there such a thing in your mind as too emotional?
No, I think there's such thing as not understanding how to regulate emotions. And I think emotion is just energy asking to be expressed. So I think when you can repress that, it can come out in really unhealthy ways and really inappropriate ways. I don't think there's any such thing as being too emotional. I think it's just not having the tools to understand how to express your energy healthfully in a way that serves you, in a way that's appropriate to other people.
I really like that. Gabby, anything to add there?
She said it perfectly.
Yeah, it was very well
She
said.
did. Yeah.
Meadow, you mentioned earlier, you said you've been begging to speak about mental health since, I think you said 2012.
Yeah.
In 2012, I didn't know what mental health was. If someone told me what to do, I'd look the other way. If someone talked about mental health, I was tuning it out before I even had a chance. So,
Yeah.
I guess my question is, where did that stem from? Why have you been so passionate about it for so long?
Oh boy, so much trauma. I like anyone that studies psychology, like I was just trying to control what I could in my family. So I had siblings, just really severe mental health issues, in and out of inpatient. I had a sibling die by suicide. My dad died when I was in high school. I went through a school shooting. Like I just went through the rigmarole, and I found that I was working through these things in real time. Like after a particular chunk of that in high school, by age 17, I asked the one friend that I knew went to therapy because her parents got divorced because no one else would talk about it, and immediately put myself in some sort of like forward motion with healing because I saw that as the only option. And when I found that to be, like you, beneficial from therapy and think this is so cool, I would kind of like speak to my experiences, or like I remember just so poignantly sitting on the dorm floor and like getting to know people in the hall, and they're like, oh, how many siblings do you have? And I'm like, well, I had 4, now I have 3, and then no one wants to talk about it. You say the word suicide and everyone like treats you different, and I'm like, I'm healed. Like I worked through a lot of shit, and I'm really proud of where I've come from, and it's part of my story, and I'm not gonna lie about it. And I just was like so disappointed that I couldn't meet anyone that was like willing to match that and not feel like they went through like a like what's it called, like a lifetime drama movie.
Yeah.
Like it didn't feel heavy to me. I felt really healed and okay with it, and I wasn't trying to say it flippantly, but I also was trying to be like recognize my story and where I came from, and no one wanted to hear it. And so I was begging for those conversations, and that's why I started working in the field, because I was the only people I could find that would talk to me about it.
You know, 2 thoughts for me. You know, one, Meadow, much appreciation for, again, talking about it, being vulnerable, and sharing that story. I think, 2, it just surfaces and reminds me of really the purpose of why we pick up a microphone and why we try to speak positively about mental health and the importance of it and therapy, because we've talked so much about people will wait for a life event to then make a change to their lifestyle. You know, think about the classic, they have a heart attack and then they decide to work on their physical health, for an example. You didn't ask for any of those events in your childhood, but in some ways it seems like it served as a catalyst for you to then properly heal yourself, learn as much as you have about mental health, go into the therapeutic practice, and now broaden a message that can really help people before they have to face the type of traumas and events that you've had to face. And so just remarkable appreciation from my end for really the purpose of what we're doing here. And then that's ultimately why is like we don't have to wait for somebody to go through such a traumatic event for them to equip themselves with the proper ways of healing and dealing with some of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wonder if that's just like, if people don't really realize they're worth it until they hit rock bottom. Like I find that's something we ask on our podcast to people a lot is like, yeah, like did you have to hit rock bottom in order to where you get now? And how do you think everyone's the same way? Do you think people can learn from other people's rock bottoms? Like it's so interesting because I think everyone has a different perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, Gabby, would you say you were at rock bottom when you ultimately decided to go to the Hoffman process? Because, you know, if I'll speak just really quickly on me, like, if I wasn't at rock bottom, I was pretty close.
Yeah.
You know, it was like I just had, I was repressing feelings and thoughts for so long. It's like you can only push them so far down. Totally. And I definitely got to that point, and that's what ultimately led to a willingness and a want to change. So I was pretty close to there. But Gabby, like, can you speak to your experience a little bit?
Yeah, Meadow has this phrase that she uses that I love, and she calls it choosing the or. And that is what I felt like I did in that moment, where I went through what I was going through in that moment, and the feeling, because like your body remembers, right? And I remember I had gone through something really similar like a decade prior, and my body was reacting like physically in the exact same way, and I felt like I was like 15 again. So I guess not a decade, because I wasn't 25, but whatever, math is not great.
Close enough.
Around there, doesn't matter. And my body was just reacting in that way, and I knew, I was like, I know how one of these roads go, because I've already taken it and it got me right back here. I just went in a fucking loop. I decided in that moment to choose the or and move forward. So yes, I felt like I had hit a moment where there was no more denying my craving and like thirst for making a change in my life. And something that I really learned day one of being at Hoffman, because just to give you a little bit about what it is, like, you don't have a phone, you can't read books, it's like no distractions, you're there with a group of people, but it's not like typical group therapy. It's very rooted in like experiential type of therapy, and it's a combination of like top down and bottom up processing, and a lot of guided meditations and visualizations and like physical activities to like release and these patterns from your body. It's all rooted in, by the way, just understanding your patterns and how like you're moving sort of your life through autopilot, either like mimicking or completely rejecting patterns that we adopted from our primary caregivers, and being able to sort of then walk the path that you are choosing for your life rather than just like reacting constantly. And a lot of it is just, I mean, all of it is rewiring your neural pathways in order to constantly choose the or. And something that I learned day one when I was there was like, I had hit my version of rock bottom, and a lot of other people had, and some hadn't, but their rock bottom looked real different from my rock bottom. Like, I was fighting with my friend group, just graduated from a great university, moving to New York City. Other people were coming from like extremely different circumstances. And I remember I felt very uncomfortable sharing my story, because I grew up in a relatively quote unquote like healthy family.
Was there some guilt there?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because and then but for me it was like, I've got, I grew up in a upper middle class family. I grew up with a nice car. I got to go on all the trips. I've gotten everything I could want, but here I am like still unhappy, and it led to like, so it's like, why am I unhappy? And then it's like you're getting mad at yourself because you're not happy. So yeah, like talk a little bit more about that.
I mean, lesson number one that I learned, not even from any of the teachers, but from two of the women that I spoke to on the first night, was everything is relative. Everything is relative. And they were these two women that were probably both like 20 years older than I was, and we were walking around the grounds, and the process hadn't even started yet. It was like the night before when everyone was arriving, and we all were kind of like sharing our stories, and they were like, nip that shit in the bud so quickly, because you didn't live my life and I didn't live your life. So what you went through and what you experienced in your childhood and those traumas, that is real. That is extremely real for you. And it helped me. But yes, there was a lot of guilt in feeling like I grew up in a, again, like normal quote unquote environment. Yeah, my parents had separated, but they had a really healthy divorce, and we spent Christmases, at my mom's house, but my dad was there, and my stepmom was there, and my stepdad was there, and like we had a very blended family. Later as an adult, I realized all the sacrifices that every party there made to make the kids comfortable, but I still had my set of shit to work through. But I did feel like a tremendous amount of guilt. And I know it's something that like I've talked with other women about now, like a lot of us that have experienced, for example, like disordered eating or eating disorders when we're younger. I remember it like, it's women, we're so communal, and it's such a beautiful part of being a woman. And also at the same time, I noticed that like before mental health was this type of conversation, it was very like competitive almost. And I will just say that across the board, rather than just about women, but like it was this competitive thing of like, your thing isn't worse than mine. Like mine's worse. So like, don't talk to me. And I bring up the disordered eating and eating disorder conversation because that was the narrative that came to my head of like having a friend group that we were all sort of moving through that at the same time and all kind of like egging each other on. And it became this competitive thing amongst us of like, who's doing what more, who's not doing what less. Like it was very interesting. And Hoffman really shook that out of me of like, shit's relative.
Yeah.
That's super important to understand. We had someone else come on the show recently, and he mentioned like he lost his dad to suicide very recently. And I think you asked the question of like, how do you deal with?
Well, how do you like empathize with? Not even empathize, but yeah, I guess how do you empathize with somebody who complains about spilled milk when you just went through this? And anyway,
his answer was, and he is a psychologist. He's studying psychology, and his answer was, well, I have to just keep in mind that everything's relative and try to empathize with them because what they're sharing is real in their life. And so I love that you just said that. I guess question for both of you: what can men do to better support women and their mental health?
Literally ask. That's it. Like what you just did. That's so beautiful and so much more unique than I think people realize. Like ask the woman in your life, like, what's up? How's your mental health? How do you feel like I can support you? Do you want to go on a walk together? Do you want to go to a support group together? Like ask people how they are and the way they want to be supported. It's like the easiest, most accessible way. And I think people get tripped up in like, I understand it's scary because with things like suicide, there is a right and wrong way to talk about it. With things like eating disorders, there's a right and wrong way to share about stuff so that you're not perpetuating harmful behaviors, but instead shedding light on experiences. And I get that that's intimidating, but at the end of the day, like even if you're messing up by saying something wrong, like we're all learning. Like we said, it's all relative. We're all going through the same experience. Like just ask someone. And that especially goes with, it's the number one myth of suicide too, just because we're touching on that a bit. Like people think that asking the question plants the seed, and that's the number one myth of suicide. Sharing about means and methods is where copycat behavior comes in, which is what people report on a lot. Asking the question, do you feel suicidal, is the number one thing you're supposed to do if you think someone is.
So us men, when a woman is showing quote unquote too much emotion, we shouldn't just label them as a crazy woman, right? Because then we end up labeling everyone as crazy because they're expressing their emotions. That's obviously a joke and a stab at those, you know, I think again, stereotypical men of us, right? That I hear it all the time, and it, you know, as I've grown my own awareness of mental health and just emotional intelligence overall, it's crazy how on the male side of the fence, it's, oh, she's crazy. But really, she's not. She's just expressing her emotions, much like we talked about. And that, you know, I say that to our listeners. If you're finding yourself just labeling somebody as crazy is a very intense, serious word, and it's likely that if you're using it frequently, you're not using it correctly at all.
Totally, yeah.
So that's you know, just my shameless plug.
And also, like, I think, yeah, like I said earlier, like we're men and women are so taught to handle emotions differently, and we also genuinely express them differently, like authentically. Like the way in which men and women can express the exact same diagnosable mental illness will look wildly different. And that's not even including like areas in the world and cultures and age groups. Like we genuinely just express ourselves differently. So just constant asking and communication and gut checks and seeing like where you're the other side of someone's coin is so beautiful. Like that's what makes us all unique. And maybe we share a way that we cope with you and you do with us. And that's how we get a little bit better and healthier together.
What are some examples how same emotion or same problem is channeled differently?
Yeah, so I think men are a lot quicker to anger and women are a lot quicker to sadness. I think the ways in which people die by suicide, like methods, which I don't want to get too much into, are very different in terms of like women consider like people around them and like how they want to leave things, and men are much more impulsive. Like just like the way in which we're quick to go to something can be very different. Like men can also experience a lot more physical symptoms. Women can be like too emotional or like emotionally expressive. Because men are not taught to cope with that, they feel it in their bodies a lot more and don't know how to handle that, and then can get that out in different ways. So it kind of depends. I mean, mental health runs the gamut, and like every person that experiences a mental health challenge, that challenge will be as unique to them as they are as a human being. You know, there's so much nuance and so much to filter through with your own life experience that everyone's everyone's experience is unique, and that's beautiful.
Gaby, we didn't give you a chance. I want to hear from you. What can we as men do to
Gabs.
to better support women in their mental health? We got to give you your time as well.
Thanks.
Pop off, yeah.
I mean, no, Meadow said it perfectly. I agree 10 out of 10. Literally just ask. Like, it's I was laughing, like, hearing you guys say, like, thinking about people having, like, too much emotion, or, like, women that are crazy, and we're using air quotes for all of these things. And it's like, I urge anybody who is let's say we're talking about men and women in the way that we are in this conversation. I urge any man who is calling, whether it's their partner, whatever, let's say they're calling their girlfriend crazy. I urge you to just, like, take a second and ask yourself, are you, like, letting her speak? Are you denying everything that she's saying? Like, is there no space for her to, like, share in any capacity whatsoever? Is, like, every time she brings up a thought, like, it's shut down? It's just, like, people aren't, if you were talking about, like, in relationships, like, people for the most part they don't get to 100 on their own. Like, someone drove them there, you know? And I just urge us to all, like, look at our dynamic in a relationship. I think sometimes we move at the end of the day, like, this is our life and it's our movie, but at the end of the day, like, other people exist around us. Just because it's our movie and we get to decide and control how we're going to live our life, there's other people, there's other features happening, and it's important to, like, take accountability for your own role in it. But I think just asking the questions, having these conversations, and I think, like, in fact, like, having these conversations is not just for us, because I think that will provide a beautiful space for men who are primarily told, like, don't have feelings, that's weak, that's lame, like, be a man. That'll allow them the safety and security to then be able to express their emotions. I'm telling you, like, these conversations, at the rate that we're moving at now, like, I have so much hope for the future, because just having these conversations is just going to make our community and us as a collective so much more empathetic and healed. Like, it's just, it's necessary. Like, we have to be having these conversations. And by the way, like, they don't always need to be heavy. That's the thing too.
Yeah.
And, like, Meadow and I talk about this a lot, and it was one of the main reasons that we started our podcast, was because we felt like at the time, all of the mental health conversations we were hearing, the few that were finally starting to, like, bubble to the surface or not even post pandemic, like during the pandemic, it was very, like, heavy and not a lot of nuance, and it was very trauma dumpy, or coming from, you know, only, like, a psychiatrist's perspective, which is, like, obviously incredibly valuable, and, like, the people we need to be interviewing, but it was almost this, like, very clinical, unapproachable thing. And when we decided to start Thoughtsmayvary, we very much were like, part of the reason that we love talking to each other about mental health is because I am not, like, I don't need to go nap for 3 hours after I talk to Meadow about, like, something that's going on. And that is something that I feel like I've dated people like that, where it's like, let's talk about, like, our spirituality and our mental health, and, like, and then you're like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. My brain just had to work so hard having this conversation with you. And why we do what we do is to make sure that these conversations are part of just, like, every day. Sometimes they can be heavy, sometimes they're not. But at the end of the day, like, we're human beings living a human experience, and, like, that shit's already heavy enough. So why don't we just like take a little bit of the load off and just be like, let's just talk about what it's like to be a human. Let's laugh about it. Let's joke about it sometimes. But, like, yeah, I think just removing, like, it doesn't always need to be this, like, heavy, like, okay, let's sit down and, like, talk. Because, like, yeah, sometimes you need that, but sometimes it's okay. It's okay for things to be a little
I think what you're saying is, like, let's just live life authentically and, like, have a normal conversation and say what comes to our mind. And sometimes that might lead to a more in-depth conversation, and other times it might be more casual. But, like, let's not, just focus solely on, like, you know, every conversation, like, going super deep, because that is exhausting. And on the flip side, let's, like, not totally have a conversation with a mask on and not share who we really are, because we're scared of what someone might think, or we're different people depending on the environment we're in. I think you're saying just, like, let's be authentic, let's be empathetic, let's be compassionate to who we're speaking with, and let's just have a normal conversation and just enjoy the fact that we're here right now. Exactly. I guess on the flip side, what do you guys think women can do to better support men in their mental health? The answer might be the same, but I'm just curious what you guys think.
Yeah.
I think make space and include them in conversations. Like, I think women can be really flippant about men. Like, Gabby and I, oof, we go on a lot of TikTok rants on our show, and like the zeitgeist and the communication of like dating and relationships and mental health and this Delulu main character energy. And if he's XYZ, it's a red flag. And we're like, this is frankly bullshit. Like, if you are actually looking for a real authentic connection, like we're talking about, like, these things don't matter. And I think there's a lot of communication from women's side that is so, like, trying to take, it's like how the pendulum swings. Like, they're trying to take ownership of their own autonomy and right to take up space and have these conversations and do all this stuff. But it's gone so far that there's some facets of it that is so exclusionary that you're just doing the same thing at that point.
Yeah, I think Meadow's right. I mean, just, I think including in the conversation, like holding space. Something we talk a lot about too is like the idea of masculine and feminine energies, and how both like men, women, however you identify, like we hold all of these energies within ourselves. And I think just creating space for men to be able to express more feminine energies and more just like of these, I guess, just not expecting them, if we don't want to fit into a stereotype, like we shouldn't expect you guys to fit into a stereotype and like always be in that mold. So I think it's just similar of just like allowing for space. And the thing is, like, I think a lot of women do, like, I think we want that, like a lot of, I know that like I'm speaking from like being in like straight relationships and like speaking with women in straight relationships, but like that we want that, like we want to be able to talk to the men in our life, whether it's our dads or our partners, about how they're feeling and have like a more human conversation with somebody. So yeah, I could really go,
I think it's also
in
like
a direction with this, but I won't.
Both sides of the same coin, like understanding that because we express things so much differently, like I don't expect my partner to express something they're feeling or like a gripe that we're having in a fight the same way that I do. Like, I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not looking for someone that wants to express themselves and experience things and communicate in my exact way that I'm doing that and become a mirror to me. In fact, like, I want him to have different strengths than me so that he supports me where I'm weak and vice versa, and together we're stronger. Like, I'm not looking for a mirror. I'm looking for that, like, I don't know how else to say it but this. I've been
if you're watching the video, just like this.
I'm like, put your hands together. Like, I want to support each other in that way. I think both sides can have a little bit of that.
I guess that's my question is, like, where is that, and this is opinion based, but like, where is that line drawn between men need to show more feminine energy, which I would love examples of that, but then also you also have to stay true to whatever we define as being a man and your masculinity. So what are maybe some examples of, I would love for a man to be able to exercise, XYZ energies, and then, but also I would also want them to retain XYZ differences between, what a woman, in the feminine sense, would have.
I mean, look, think about it this way, like, and I'll use myself as an example. When I'm working, I'm very much in my masculine energy, and I really like that about myself. Like, I'm very firm and straight to the point, and I know what I want, and I can be decisive, and like, I live in my masculine when I'm working. In my relationship, I like to live pretty completely in my feminine, where I can sort of sit back and just like, it's a little bit lighter and like airier, and like maybe not have to make every single decision all the time. And so I think that's just in the same way that I do that dance, I think we need to allow everybody to be able to do that dance in whatever way feels best for them. So I don't think that me saying like men, we need to give men more grace to live in their feminine means like you need to do that all the time. Like, if that doesn't feel good for you, that doesn't feel good for you. But like, if we talk about like wounded masculine and feminine energies, I would just like urge, if we're talking about men, for example, if they feel uncomfortable with certain like emotions that might feel that they're like stereotypically feminine and they're weak and whatever other stereotype we've like pounded into our heads as women, I would urge that person to like take a look and be like, why am I this? Why does this make me so uncomfortable? Like, why am I so uncomfortable with, am I uncomfortable with my sexuality? Am I uncomfortable with like showing this sort of emotion? Did I watch my dad do that? Did I watch my grandfather do that? Did my mom say something to me? Like, just get curious about why things make you feel a certain type of way, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think just like,
oh, sorry,
go ahead.
baby.
No, that's it.
I was
Take it
gonna
away,
say,
sister.
it's like that balance of like figuring out what is your authentic self and what feels good for you, but also questioning why the same patterns keep occurring in your relationship or life or behaviors that aren't serving you. So like getting curious about your patterns and thinking through that, and then that only reaffirms what your authentic self is even more clearly.
Yeah, I mean, and that takes hard work. That takes a lot of honesty.
It does.
It takes a lot of honesty with yourself.
It absolutely does.
I have a question for you, Gaby. I was just thinking about this, and I might be totally wrong with my hypothesis here. But are you still best friends with the girls that you mentioned you got in a really big fight with at 22?
I literally thought he was gonna be like, "Are you a Taurus?"
I'll get to where I'm going with this.
No.
Me too.
Okay, you said no. Okay, that's okay. That's what that was my hypothesis. But my question, I guess the reason I'm asking is like pre and post Hoffman process. Were there relationships in your life that you all realized, like as you became more self-aware, maybe that like weren't maybe serving you the way you thought they were? Because I think to myself about therapy, and like my social circle pre and post therapy, and really not even therapy necessarily, but pre and post self-discovery and self-healing has changed quite a bit. And like I can very clearly tell who I want to be around, who gives me energy, who drains me of energy. So that's kind of why I asked. I'm just curious how your guys' maybe relationships, both of you, have evolved over time as you've become more self-aware and of who you are and who you want to spend your time around.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, my relationships have changed. Some have, I mean, all the relationships have changed in their own right, but I'm saying like the people and the players, some are still very much there and sturdy, and some have came and went. And I think that, something that like I learned by being there was that the urges and the pings that I was getting and like the things leading to these arguments, yes, my own role very much played in it. My own decision making very much played in it. But also it was like I was screaming internally for a very long time, like needing change and needing adjustment, and didn't see another direction, didn't see another possibility. And post Hoffman, I was just a lot more sensitive to energies and a lot more sensitive to my like I knew who I was. I always say like I left Hoffman and I could hear myself think for the first time in my life at 22. And because of that, because I knew who I was, it was very easy for me to be able to know and identify when things didn't feel good. Now, I want to say that with the caveat of, I think right now, as beautiful as it is that we're having all of these conversations about our mental health and about boundaries and about expansive friendships and all of these things, I think sometimes people will take it and run with it in a direction that is way too far. And I have totally done this where I got all this new verbiage. I have all this new like self-healing, and I'm like, fuck this person and fuck that person and get them out of my life right now. And probably didn't handle some of those friendship breakups in the best way that I probably could have. And definitely that person deserved a lot more respect from me. And I just urge people to like be careful when they're moving through ending friendships or moving on or searching for new friends, and really just like know yourself and understand why you're doing it. Are you doing it because like that person told you something you don't agree with? Or is it like deeper than that? And there's like a disconnect there, and they're not letting you grow as a human being, and they don't make you feel good. They're sucking your energy, like whatever. It can be a million and one reasons why you choose to have different friends in your life. But I think right now we're very much, like Meadow mentioned, this like main character energy is like a term we hear a lot on TikTok. And it's very much like, essentially, if you're not a yes man, like get out of my way. Like I'm going to be like, the main character of this movie. And so I just see a lot of people like doing that. And long-winded way of answering your question. But yes, post Hoffman, my picker has gotten clearer, I would say, of like what feels good to me and what doesn't. And I think that just comes naturally once you start like actually getting clarity on who you are.
Yeah, that's very beautifully said, because it's very hard to describe. Like when you talk about energy and feeling energy, and if you would have said that 12 months ago, I would have been like, I hear her, but I don't know what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. But it's very clear now, like after and again, we're all healing every day, but it's very clear when you can feel that now. And so when you were talking, I was just resonating like very deeply with it. But Meadow, like I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, very similar. It's interesting because when I went to therapy at 17 in a response to all those traumas that I was kind of sharing about, I thought that I was going to go heal all those things. And the first thing I walked out with is how to set boundaries in friendships. And so it's interesting because I think, like Gaby said, like we can be quick to nixing people, where I think maybe sometimes you just have to maybe start an authentic conversation for the first time in a relationship that's been around a long time. And that can come with its own set of trials and tribulations, and setting boundaries in new ways, or recategorizing friends in different ways. Like you can't show up as your complete, whole, authentic self and give every 100% part of yourself to every person you meet. It's just not appropriate or frankly honest. And so I think like kind of dancing with, like you said, figuring out who does give you energy, who doesn't. Where can you have like a really beautiful conversation that opens this up more? Where maybe is it more appropriate to step back? We just had such an amazing guest on our podcast. She is a social worker and also a mental health educator. Her name is Mina B. And she just came out with a new book that's all about community healing. And her tagline is self-care is the bridge to community care, and community care is the bridge to community healing. Like so much of this work is so individual, and we turn to ourselves to figure out who we are. And that's absolutely the first step when you don't know. But then that like unwillingness or maybe just like trepidation to go back out into community and bring this into community, like that's where the fucking magic happens. That's where we all are connecting. That's why podcasts are so beautiful. That's how you make this ripple effect of monumental change, is like by everyone in the community together being like, how are you changing? How are you growing? What did you learn? Like we said, it's not a one size fits all model, and the work never ends. This is something Gaby and I say all the time. Like, we're never going to be self-actualized. That's not our role here. And so if this never ends, the only fucking way to do this is together. You got to you got to laugh in community and make it through, because it's too hard on your own for this long. God damn. Like, I'm trying to do it with some friends and have a little fun on the way.
Well, let me ask you about your friendship here, because I think, if I followed correctly, Meadow met Gaby at a pretty critical time in Gaby's life, where she was about to go through quite a bit of growth, healing, etc. How has Gaby's growth as an individual, this is a question for Meadow, how has Gaby's growth as an individual also translated or correlated into growth in the friendship or the relationship overall?
Yeah, we like to say that we like traded superpowers. She's so beautiful and smart and cool at so many things that I feel so uneducated on. And it's so cool to watch like how we're like the exact same person and polar opposites at the same time. Yeah. And so the ability to connect over like fundamental values and the way in which we see the world, and then also that's the name of the show, Thoughtsmayvary. We completely disagree on so many things, and that has been so expansive for me as an individual, for me in my relationships, for me professionally, for us together. Like, we just continue to expand our own mindset of what's possible. We're each other's biggest cheerleaders, so all she does is reinforce how worthy I am of the life I want to live, and then gives me the tools that maybe like I didn't think of that way. Like, we really can like hold a mirror at different angles to each other in such a cool and supportive way, and like really honor our differences in that while expanding our perspective.
So, because actually, you just made me think of, that was a great question, MD.
Thanks, Meadow.
When we were getting interviewed, and our interviewee asked a great question, or interviewer, and she asked, so I want to ask this to you guys, what is something, or I'll ask along the similar lines to each of you, what is something you admire about the other person?
Well, what is your favorite? I think what is your favorite?
What is your favorite? But
you want to go
I'm
into
mixing that. Favorite's hard. But what is just something you admire about each other?
I'm like, which one do I pick?
I know. I mean, well, like going off what Meadow said earlier, I think the reason why our friendship works, because people ask us about our friendship a lot. Yeah. And it like, I feel flattered every single time. But it's because we have just like deep respect for one
Yeah.
another, because like Meadow said, we're the same but also very different, and we'll disagree on like fundamental things that like people could fight over, and Meadow and I don't, because I completely respect her vision, opinion, autonomy, authenticity, like fully. And I think that that's helped me also move that way in other relationships where, like we were saying earlier, how people are quick to like cut somebody out. I think the point of like a lot of this work that we do is to then be able to have a lot more grace with people. And I'm not saying, I'm not making excuses for like abuse, like homophobia, racism, like any sort of like major boundary crossing or just like horrible abusive behavior. But I'm just saying, like in everyday relationships, I think the beauty of this type of work is to be able to like hold a lot more grace, space, and compassion for other people, and to like totally respect their views and understand that they don't need to be like your clone for you guys to be friends and get along. But I think one of the things that I admire the most about Meadow is her incredible ability to just like hear me out. Anyone listening before I say this who like is not into like anything spiritual is gonna be like, this girl's
Oh gosh,
a Looney
yeah.
Tune. But like your ability, Meadow, to just so effortlessly dance with the universe is like wild to me. Like
I like that.
wild to me.
Very well
She just
said.
like moves. We always say like Meadow's a fairy. Like she's a
I am.
fairy in another life.
Yeah.
And like every time I see like a little
In this
cottage
life.
house or like a very pretty bush, I'm like, Meadow's living in there somewhere. She's a little fairy, just like living in her fairyland. And not me saying you're like living in a pretty bush, but like you know what I mean.
My name is Meadow. Like that adds up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Meadow Lark.
But yeah, you just do this thing. You're just like, you like glide through life and like move through things. And I know it's not effortless, but it really feels that way. And you just like have this incredible ability of just like, you fucking get it. Like you get it. You know what I mean? When it comes to the universe, like we always talk about like synchronicities and like people think they're like coincidences and like seeing things, you know, in our daily life. And Meadow and I always joke that like we'll see these things happen and we'll be like, yeah, of course, like duh, like of course that's happening, because we're so tuned in, and we always say like the veil is so thin. But she's really helped me with that. And like I really admire your ability to just like the way you move through life is remarkable, is really cool.
That's a very nice compliment.
Kind of puts our answers to shame.
It didn't. It wasn't compliment to me, but that's a very beautiful compliment.
She
Go
also
ahead,
taught
Meadow.
me the power of flaky salt. Maldon flaky salt.
Period.
So,
If
yeah.
no one is using flaky salt, you need to top every dish you're making with the flaky salt. I carry a to-go tin in my purse. It's that important.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure I gave a one-word answer. I'm like, it's discipline.
Yeah, I was so disappointed by his answer.
And we're over here waltzing with the universe. I'll have to rethink and come up with
Come
new
listen to our
language
podcast, guys.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Meadow.
You can steal our answers. 1, thank you so much. I love you more than anything. My absolute soul sister. 2, everything Gaby said is correct. Like our just like deep respect for each other is why this works and why we can work together and totally be best friends. I'll say when I first met her, it's funny because you said before, like Gaby was in such a pivotal moment of her life when I met her, but I was the biggest people pleaser, pushover, little fairy, I'll do whatever you want. And Gaby has so clearly, like through her own actions, behaviors, how she moves through the world, and by showing me, like she's taught me so much of my own intrinsic self-worth and what I'm worth and what I'm allowed to ask for, what I'm allowed to put boundaries up for, why it's not selfish, why it actually is supportive to all my relationships and how I move through life. Like she's made me so much more confident in who I am as a person by showing me like how self-assured she is and how she's willing to admit when she doesn't know something, the way she's willing to show up to spaces, like how she moves in general and the way in which she shows me myself has been the most monumental experience for my self-growth.
Oh, thanks.
Beautiful compliments. And I just want to really quickly, Gaby, on your point where you're talking about having more grace for people, and it just made me think of something. I was on in another podcast yesterday, and I had mentioned that like I was very insecure in college, so I was a dick. Like I was just not I was a mean person. And he asked me towards the end, he said, have you forgiven yourself for being a dick? And my answer was, I have, because my whole thought was you cannot change the past, but what I can do is change how I respond going forward, and showing up with respect and with a place of understanding and empathy to everyone that I go and meet going forward is all I can do. And there was a point in my life where there was a lot of guilt there, but we can't change who we were in the past. But I think we should give ourselves some grace, and then just be better going forward. So that was very. I really like that you said that. I think we should all give each other a little bit more grace.
I have a question real quick. Have either of you gone down the rabbit hole of shadow work yet?
No, but I'm intrigued. I'm also intrigued in the Hoffman process, but no, let's hear it.
You're going to love it. Like, you should go down that rabbit hole tonight. Have you gone down, like, inner child work or explored that at all in therapy?
No, but I saw your guys' whole thing on it. Yeah.
It's kind of like another
work.
We love inner child work. It's another facet of that. So everyone has a shadow self that lives inside of them. It's a psychology concept coined by Carl Jung in the early 1900s. But it's basically like all of the embarrassing, repressed, shame, blame, like everything that part of you that you hide from the world and you don't want other people to see, amalgamated into one figure as your shadow. And learning to accept them, love them, give them grace, look at them, connect with them, bring them into your daily life and your present now is one of the most like healing and integrative and coolest ways that we can have compassion for ourselves and other people, and like do what you're talking about and like show up with this grace in real time moving forward.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
Go down a rabbit hole. I think you're going to really like it.
I found something to do this weekend. All right, without further, I just want to thank you guys for coming on here and for sharing your stories and being open. This was such a fun conversation. We've got 3 rapid fire questions for both of you. The first one is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or just like your favorite quote? Could be either or.
So hard. Okay, quote. I thought of 2, and they're both by Ram Dass, who is a spiritual teacher that my mom introduced me to when I was in high school, which is why I think I have the ability to choose the or at a very young age. He says, 1, we're all just walking each other home. And it's kind of his metaphor for life and death. And like, we're all just trying to get to that other side. And so making life a little bit easier. And then he also says, we're all just God in drag. And I think it's the funniest and
it's the best quote ever.
Like, that is like my philosophy summed up into a phrase.
Oh, I love that. I'm trying to think of like quotes that I don't know. Meadow always has the quotes in her back pocket. I think
you dropped a few from the Hoffman process.
Or advice.
I mean, we love
advice
Hoffman.
Or advice.
Yeah. Okay. I think a piece of advice that it's coming to my mind a lot lately. So one of the best pieces of advice that I've received is not everybody deserves access to you, and that's okay. And again, going back to like, it's not about cutting people off. It's not about this, not about that. I think that Meadow touched on it earlier by saying like, we can't expect one person to be your everything. And it's not fair to put that pressure on other people or to put that pressure on ourselves. And so when I think about that advice of like, not everybody deserves access to you, it gives me this grace, particularly like now what we're doing with these conversations, and for you guys too, like with these conversations that we're having. Vulnerability does not equate access, and vulnerability can look different for other people. And I talked about energies earlier, and I just feel like I'm really susceptible to that. And so that's the way that I take that advice, is like, not everyone has earned like a piece of me.
Yeah, that gives you a sense of freedom, I would think.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. This one's even harder, so get ready.
Oh, God.
Oh,
It's
great.
my favorite. But if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
And it can't be each other.
Well, you've already probably done that,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
I have like a couple of cop-outs. Can I have dead people?
Yeah.
Okay, well then I have a cop-out answer and a fun answer. My cop-out answer is my dad and my fiance's mom. My fiance's mom passed away when he was 9. My dad passed away when I was 17, and getting the 4 of us at a table is going to be the dream come true. My fun answer is my dream blunt rotation is Abby Jacobson, Alana Glazer, Zoe Kravitz, and myself, which are the 2 girls from Broad City, if you're unfamiliar with that show, and Zoe Kravitz and myself.
I just love how direct and like confident
it's
that
written
answer
down.
was.
Yeah.
I've thought
That
about
wasn't
it.
the first time you thought about that. I
No.
could just tell.
It wasn't
No.
even dinner.
No.
It's better than dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Meadow thinks about it often. It's in her notes app. She's manifesting it every day. Prays on it. There's a candle, crystals, whole thing.
Literally. Oh, man.
I love, like, okay, the dead person answer that I'm going to bring up because we have to now is.
We have to.
Okay, it's my grandma on my mom's side, my maternal grandmother, who passed away when I was like in the 5th grade. And I just would love to be able to talk to her as an adult, like, and just hear about her life. Both my parents are Cuban immigrants, and just hearing what that was like for my grandmother, like leaving with her 2 kids at the time. Like, my God, I have so many questions for her that like I just didn't get to talk to her about and just hear her story. But living, if you know me, like, this is not shocking, but Ava DuVernay, like, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
She is
Absolutely.
my, like,
All right, love that,
storytelling queen.
Yeah.
Last question. This is an easy one, but just what do you guys like to do in your free time, hobbies, that kind of thing?
Meadow's like, well, Gaby lays down, and that's what she does.
Hey, that's a hobby.
People have asked us, like, what do you guys
Self-care.
like to do when you're together? And we're like, we melt into the couch and
talk.
don't talk to each other. Like, we talk so much for work. I'll go to Gaby's house, and we literally just lay down and watch the Kardashians. Like, we don't do anything.
Meadow, what do you do what do we do in our free time? That's your question?
Yeah, hobbies.
Okay, I
I'm a
like
big-
going on walks.
Yeah.
I like reading. Sometimes I try to paint and draw, and I have a family of like classically trained fine artists, so I know I'm not an artist at all, but I love having like that creative expression. We both love
Yeah.
to cook, and we both love to eat.
Yes.
Who
Big eater over here. Love
Yeah.
cooking. I'm a big beach person.
Yeah.
It just is so far away from me in California. I mean, it's a 40-minute drive, which I'm very dramatic about. But water is very healing for me. Love being by the beach. I love a sunset. My boyfriend will make fun of me until the day he dies about like how much I'm just like, should we go watch a sunset? Like, do you want to just like go see the sunset?
It's the best.
I love a sunset.
It's the best.
I just like to rest, man. Like I'm tired.
Yeah, that's fair. I love the creative expression, Meadow, too. I think, especially as adults, I feel like most of us, and I've gotten mine through comedy improv now, and I've just seen it because I
cool.
started recently, just how like empowering it is.
Yeah.
And I think just so many of us adults just kind of put it to the wayside.
It's like
And,
not
and this is a way to do it as well. you know,
Yeah.
on a podcast.
You're gonna like. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just gonna tell you one more time. You're gonna like inner child work because a lot of
Yeah.
it is just to do with like play.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I will definitely be in touch about that. I'm definitely gonna go down
I have
that
like
rabbit
a
hole.
adult paint by numbers website where you can like buy the canvases and it's like beautiful Gustav Klimt paintings, but you're literally just doing paint by number. Like there's such fun, silly little like inner
Yeah.
child. Oh my gosh, yeah, we'll send you a big old list.
Please do. All right, we're gonna sign off. Your Meadow, Gaby, thank you guys so much.
Thank
Thank
Really
you for
appreciate your
having
time.
us. This was awesome.